Hello to everyone joining. I am just going to give us a few moments to allow people to trickle in before we kick things off. So once again, if you're just joining now, we're just going to give it a minute to allow people to come in. Okay, I'm just going to give it another 20 seconds or so and we'll get started. All right, let's kick things off. So welcome everyone from wherever you are joining us around the globe. My name is Laurel Grodman. I'm Managing Director of Admissions for the Yale School of Management. I am also a proud alum of Yale SOM, class of 2006. Thanks so much for joining us today for leveraging the MBA to change careers. I know that many of you have careers on your mind as you're entering your business school exploration process. It's obviously a huge driver for this change that you're looking to undertake. So I'm excited to be able to give you a few perspectives on that over the course of today's event. So I will start things off with introductions from the panelists that we have joining us here today. We'll start with Abigail Keys, who is our Assistant Dean for the Career Development Office. Abigail, if you want to say a few words.
Sure, thanks Laurel, and welcome everyone. I'm Abigail Keys. I lead our Career Development Office at Yale SOM. I've been here for about 4.5 years. And prior to that, I worked for a number of years in a number of different roles at NYU Stern. And once upon a time, I worked in finance, marketing, and consulting. So I've sort of spanned a lot of different industries and made a lot of career changes. I'm excited to talk to you today about how we can support you.
Great, thank you. Abigail, I think you got a little cut off at the very end if you just want to do a quick mic readjust. But I think we heard the majority of that. John Ormachea, who graduated from SOM in 2020, if you want to tell us a little bit about your journey pre-SOM and then your time there and now your time after, that would be a great way to start.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Laurel, and welcome everyone. My name is John. I was actually born and raised in Venezuela, but then I moved to the US for college. And after college, I worked in consulting for 5 years. And I knew towards the end of my time in consulting that I wanted to transition to a career in investment banking. And so that's why I chose to come to Yale to pursue my MBA. And I definitely was very thankful, happy to have done so because Yale gave me with all the opportunities and all the resources that I needed to make a successful transition. And I've done so. And yeah, pretty happy now. I've been working at Evercore in investment banking for the last year. And yeah, very excited for the rest of the panel answering some of your questions.
Great, thanks so much, Sean. And then next we've got Cannon Shipman, who is a current SOM student in the middle of her 2 years. Cannon, if you want to share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Cannon. I am originally from Alabama, and prior to SOM was teaching. So I was teaching middle school math in Charlotte, North Carolina, and doing some school operations work during the summer. I came to SOM with the intent to do consulting, and this summer I'm interning with McKinsey & Company. And then on campus, I'm involved in quite a few of the consulting related clubs, as well as data analytics club as an incoming lead.
Great, thanks so much to all of you. So the idea of this session is we do want to keep things interactive. So if you've got questions now or questions come up over the course of hearing from our panelists, please enter those into the Q&A function. Don't use the chat for that. We're not going to be keeping an eye on that, but if you can direct things towards Q&A. Diana, who's with us behind the scenes, will be channeling those forward to me. But in the meanwhile, I'm going to kick things off with a few questions that I know are very common for students who are going through this process. And I know one thing that is that commonly arises for prospective students thinking about going to business school is how the Career Development Office will support their aspirations and their goals in the career search space. So I'm going to ask Abigail if you could kick things off with providing a high-level overview of the Career Development Office, or the CDO at Yale SOM, and how that works.
Sure. So we have about 20 of us who support you, and our team is actually divided into two teams. One is much more behind the scenes, although extremely important, working on your behalf, forming partnerships with employers, creating different kinds of events, interactive events, large events, really generating all sorts of coffee chats to networking, multi-employer networking events. So you will see them a little bit and interact with them a little bit through our student clubs, but mostly they are working on your behalf behind the scenes to engage employers, educate employers about you. On the other side, we have our coaching and career education team, and they are all individuals who you will get to know very well. And they work with students both individually in coaching sessions. They do small interactive strategy sessions. We have large workshops. We have a very active, well, we have actually many very active Slack channels, but especially the coaching channel. So there are a lot of different ways that our team interacts with you. And we really, while our summer programming, we expect everybody to participate in, we really don't prescribe what you have to do with us beyond that, because we know that for each of you, it's going to be different. And some of that is driven by what you need. Some of that's just driven by personal preference and what will really resonate with you. And there are some students who really learn a lot and get a lot from big sessions that they can see how other students are doing and learn from each other. Others really thrive in the one-on-one coaching. And so it's really up to you to, I would encourage you to try all of it and to figure out what actually works best for you.
Great, thank you. And a follow-up to that, it'd be great to get a little bit of a sense of the timeline here. So when does your team first connect with incoming students, and can you give us a sense of what that recruiting timeline looks like?
Sure. So we first connect with incoming students at the beginning of June. So we are well into working with our incoming class already, and which is great because some students jump right in June 1st or whenever they get their email from us and the beginning of the programming. Others sometimes are too busy finishing up their prior job or moving, and they start a little bit later in the summer. And there are ways that we can work with people to make sure that there are plenty of opportunities to catch up. It really is okay either way. The reason we start in the beginning of June and encourage you to is because that gives you the time to really explore and prepare before you're thrown into SOM and all the amazing opportunities that really it presents, but also that it pulls at, because there's so much to choose from. So we want to give you some time to focus on getting yourself grounded and clear on your career before you jump into the rest of it, because it's going to be a really amazing ride, but it's full and busy. And so we really want to give you that support. In terms of the recruiting timeline, it varies a lot depending on what you want to do. Recruiting starts fast and furious, though. If you are interested in larger companies that do more structured recruiting, it really starts in terms of events and networking as soon as classes start. In some cases, for diversity recruiting, it may begin earlier. Usually interviewing is in December or January, and then all the way through May. So it really varies. That said, there are always opportunities to change your mind and shift gears and jump into things. Continued opportunities come up throughout the year. Some of the most amazing internship opportunities aren't even available until May because those organizations aren't sure what their needs are until then. And so I really like to encourage people to follow what's important to you and what you care about, more than thinking, oh no, I have to do this because it's what's right here. Sometimes that's the case, but sometimes it's really important to know that there are so many amazing opportunities, and sometimes the first one isn't what really is best for you.
Thank you for that, and thinking about that timeline and how intense or full, I think, as you said, it can be. there's certainly some prospective students coming into the MBA search who are looking to accelerate simply on the career path that they're currently on. But as we all know, the overwhelming majority of people applying to business school are looking to make some kind of change. And even coming into SOM, just looking at industry alone, about 75% of our students each year, come into the program and then leave in a different industry than where they started. And that's just on that one dimension. And so, given that timeline, how easy or difficult is it to navigate a career change in that context?
So I am sort of a contrarian, even on my team on this. I don't like to think of it as a career change. I like to think of it as a progression, because the more you think of building on what you've done, even if it's seemingly very different, the clearer it is what you need to do, what you need to learn, and how you can move forward. And so there are a lot of different ways that that we work with people to do that. And it takes work. You need to take ownership over the process and put the work in. We're here with you every step of the way, and people do it all the time. There are some clear steps to follow. There's definitely, though, I think the hardest part is the soul searching and really asking yourself, why do you want to do this? Not just what sounds good, but what does it mean to you? What skills are you looking to use? What are you looking to leverage? What do you need to learn? What do you think is really exciting and you know nothing about? And to really be successful in that search, you're going to have to fill that gap. And to ask yourself those questions earlier really makes a difference, because you have more time to make it up. One of the things that we do as part of our summer programming, the summer programming includes a lot of preparation. It also includes personal assessments. And then it ends with 2 weeks of panels. And this year we have 19 panels. It's usually between 15 and 20, depending on the year and the makeup of the panels. And they cross industries. We have alumni participating across geographies, across pretty much everything you could think of. And the purpose of those is really for people to ask their questions, to hear from alumni. We actually try to target alumni with 5 years or less experience, so they can remember what it's like to be in your shoes, and they can share what it's like to make the changes they made, what they did that worked, what they didn't, what they wish they had known, and really, so you can hear from their firsthand advice. I think that the more that you participate and the more that you explore, one of the things I always tell students is attend, whether it's live or recorded, the ones that you've never heard of or you've never thought of, because you'll either think this is so not for me and this is why, and that's important information, or, oh, I never thought about this, maybe I should learn more about it. And either way, the earlier you start seeing what it is that resonates with you and what you do want to learn about, and get clear, you know what, I'm okay not learning about that, the more you can focus.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful, Abigail. I'm going to move over to John and Kenan to hear directly a little bit about the experience in going through this process. So, John, if you could put yourself back in the shoes of your pre-MBA self, tell us about why you pursued an MBA, and did you know at that point in time that you were looking to make a pivot?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, I definitely knew that I wanted to make a transition. I felt like I had worked in consulting before my MBA, and I knew that I had learned quite a bit, but I wanted to get a bit of a different type of skill set, a bit of different type of knowledge. And so I knew going into my MBA that I most likely wanted to make a transition to investment banking. I had considered when I was an undergrad, a major in finance, and so something always that I had an interest in. And so I definitely thought of an MBA sort of as a platform. And I'm very glad I did, because, from the second that even before, quite frankly, I started my MBA, I remember coming for welcome weekend and meeting a few folks who had interned in investment banking or were going to work there full time. And I remember connecting with them, asking them for materials and things that I could maybe start looking at, and things that I can maybe, start doing so that I can hit the ground running. Because like Abigail said, for certain careers like investment banking, consulting, maybe others, the career does start pretty quickly. And so I think I did a good job at trying to forefront some of that work before even starting. And I'm glad I did, because by the time I came to campus, things moved pretty quickly. But that being said, I remember also YSOM providing us with all the resources, all the different career panels. I remember even during orientation, attending a 1 hour session where we brought, I want to say, 4 or 5 alums who worked all in investment banking, and they came to campus and we had like a Q&A that, you know, told us more about like what it is they did. And there were different levels, like, you know, from associates to like managing directors. So they, you know, walked us through their career, what it is they do, why they think a career in investment banking is attractive. And then they even talked about like the different resources that the school offered, and to make sure that we took advantage. And so to me, that was pretty wide open. You know, I opened my eyes. And then I want to say like a week or two after, like the club started hosting like the first like sessions, and I remember attending the finance club, and I was pretty impressed because I could tell from the beginning that the finance club really had like a very structured like program and curriculum that it felt to me the way it was communicated is true. And I can talk because then I was a finance club vice president. You know, the finance club really developed this curriculum that if you follow it and you're, you know, you do your things, you prepare, you know, you have a really good, like really good chances of getting that internship that hopefully turns into a full-time offer. So I think to summarize, I think what I'm happy that I did, it was even before starting on campus, I really thought about like what it is that I wanted to do and what are some of the things that I could start doing even before starting to like sort of get like a leg up and not be like surprised that things were like moved too fast and that I wasn't like ready to like start like networking events and meeting people and going to New York for coffee chats and things like that. So I would say that would be like my biggest advice for people is, and I know it's not the same for everyone, like some people might need a little more time and might need to attend different events and talk to different clubs, but to the extent you can front load some of that, I would say that's going to be pretty helpful and it's going to pay dividends for sure.
Thank you for that. And Ken, thinking about your experience sort of leading up to the MBA, so you gained admission to Yale SOM probably roughly a year ago in very, very unusual circumstances during a pandemic. And I'm guessing that was a very different sort of way to enter business school than really any other class in time has started. And so, you know, knowing what was ahead of you, the uncertainty around how classes would be delivered, the uncertainty around what the recruiting experience would look like. I'd love to both hear a little bit about your decision to join the Yale SOM community at that time, but also, you know, how your experience has been navigating the job search in particular in a virtual setting.
Yeah, of course. So first, to answer the piece about making my decision. Yeah, I was admitted round 2 of 2020, which was around March 2020 for context. So I was making my decision right at the height of the pandemic. And as I was kind of weighing my choices and, you know, if this made sense as a time for business school, I spoke to someone who reframed it as like not a normal business school year versus this year, but much more of a, what would you be doing if you weren't in business school this year? And I think that helped me a lot to think about, you know, really all of the reasons why I wanted to go to business school hadn't changed. And if anything, you know, coming from education and, you know, one of my big reasons being, you know, wanting to see more organizational views and gaining the managerial skills to do that with an education eventually. Like that really was even put into focus in the midst of the pandemic as schools were rapidly going online, and you could see that and, you know, both amazing things happening and real opportunities for growth within that. And so, you know, taking stock, you know, that hadn't changed. My reasons, like it being a good time for me personally to have a career pivot, hadn't changed. And so all of those things lined up where it just seemed like the perfect timing. And I think throughout the year I saw that, where particularly comparing my year at SOM compared to friends in other grad school programs or friends who were still in industry, I think my year looked very different in a good way of, you know, being able to create new connections with people and learn new things and do new things, even in a hybrid environment. And then to speak to that end as well, yeah, it definitely was a huge question mark of what the year was going to look like, even as the summer went on. But I think it was helped a lot by, I mean, some great professors who made the transition to online and, you know, clearly had the green screen going behind them and were ready to go. But also with a student body that was willing to be creative in how to make connections. And so some of that was like transitioning fundings to Zoom, but a lot of it too was doing smaller group things and finding outdoors events in person when possible, which I also think translated over to recruiting. So whether that's like coffee chats with second years or being able to have more one-on-one and small group coffee chats with firms was really huge for me. As someone who, like, I think to your point, Abigail, earlier about different ways to interact with the CDO, like I'm very much a small group person. And I do think the hybrid online format helped that a lot in terms of being able to create more one-on-one connections, as well as, you know, not having, John, to your point earlier about having to go to New York every week. I think in some ways it was easier on a lot of us in terms of, you know, maybe getting tired eyes after staring at Zoom for a while, but not having quite as much travel, which, you know, I personally found very nice to flip from one Zoom screen to another instead of traveling.
I have no doubt that the employers and the organizations that you ultimately join are going to be the downstream beneficiaries of all the resilience and the adaptability that your class has shown. And so I think that will, as challenging a year as it might have been, I think it will definitely pay dividends you know, down the road. Cannon, staying with you, and then John, I'm going to ask a similar question of you as well. I'd like to hear more specifically about the resources that you found most helpful in securing your internship at McKinsey. And then John, similarly, I mean, you have access to so many things between the CDO and your clubs and your peers, faculty, job checks, all of that good stuff. What are the things that stand out to you as being most helpful?
Yeah, I think I mainly used other like student-led organizations and then the CDO for my search. So like Consulting Club was absolutely wonderful in creating almost a recruiting guide where they had curriculum every week, and especially for somebody who was a career changer and like, you know, had never taken a finance econ strategy class in undergrad. That was really helpful to have that curriculum laid out, and then also have the infrastructure for case teams where you could choose, you know, how intense you wanted to go about the recruiting for people who are coming, you know, with different degrees of, you know, decision making of where they're at with consulting, which is really, really nice and really strong curriculum as well. And not only that, but Consulting Club, I think, really helped with forming one-on-one relationships with second years, even in a virtual environment, which I really appreciated, and really took a lot of feedback in terms of when first years felt like they had more questions that weren't getting answered. They immediately set up sessions and immediately provided other ways for us to get those answered, which is really, really nice. And then on the CDO side of things, the resources I used the most were the coffee chat help, having formal coffee chats with different offices. So I was trying to decide where I wanted to recruit throughout the fall was really nice as a kind of gateway into getting to know firms and getting to know specific offices. And then I used a lot of their interview prep as well for the non-case side of the interview, so the behaviorals, both in, yeah, and that was great. Just in getting immediate feedback and being able to apply it again my next session. I use that quite a bit. Yeah, and all around, it was very, very helpful.
Thank you, Cannon. And John, how about you?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say similar for me. I mean, I would say for me, it was sort of a combination of the Finance Club, the CDO, and the Yale, just in general, like the Yale Alumni Network. So starting with the Finance Club, I think as I sort of mentioned a minute ago, come to campus, you join the club. You can almost think of like the Finance Club almost like taking like a class. We would meet the majority of the semester once a week, and then even for a stretch of like almost like 6-7 weeks, we would even meet twice a week. And the recurring meeting was, you know, they walked us through the process, where we should be in the process, what are some of the things that we should do, shouldn't be doing, how do we approach networking events, like, et cetera, more like process related. And then for almost like 2 months now, we would have a few second year students on Sundays come in and like spend with us like 2, sometimes even 3 hours, helping us get up to speed on like technical concepts, because as part of like an investment banking process, you get asked all sorts of like finance and accounting and valuation and those type of questions. And so we had like a number of people who even like on their Sundays, would spend 2 to 3 hours with us and like get us up to speed. They would give us homework. We would like turn in the homework, like sort of get like comments. And so that to me was incredibly helpful and speaks about like the commitment that we have with one each other. So like the Science Club community in general is very committed to one another. And it's not just you come in, you get your internship and you're like, peace, I'm out. No, you definitely see a lot of, pay forward. And I saw a lot of that. With the CDO, I definitely use the CDO a lot, especially for like doing like mock interviews, primarily like behaviorals, but also some technicals as well. Coming up to like interviews as we are closer, like in November, December, I definitely use them a lot to just like practice, because practice, of course, practice makes perfect. So I use them a lot, quite a bit. And then I would say like the last that sometimes people don't even think about, but I think is very truly like a differentiator of Yale is the Yale alumni. I don't think I had a single email that I sent out asking for a coffee chat unanswered. Everyone was very responsive, wanting to help. And even if they, for some reason, didn't think it was like a fit or something, it would still like give you advice. It would still like almost treat you like as a friend, kind of. And so to me, that was very special, because I definitely felt like the alumni community in general was very interested in wanting to make sure that we all succeed. And so I think that's definitely a differentiator of Yale. I think part of it is because, the experience that we get at Yale SOM is truly so unique and special that I think people want to pay forward. So I would say those are probably the main resources that I definitely use. I mean, other things, of course, but those are probably would be the more relevant ones that I use. Yeah.
Thank you, John. And I'll echo that last sentiment about the responsiveness of the alumni network. When my first 4 years working at SOM were actually spent in our career development office, and used to lead these small groups in a variety of career-oriented exercises. And one of the pieces of advice that I'd always give, because I'd seen it happen, is don't go sending 10 invitations out for coffee chats to SOM alums and expect, you'll have to manage finding time and space to have meetings with a handful of them. Probably 9 of them are going to get back to you within the week, and the other one was on vacation and we'll get back to you the following week. And then you actually have to manage those conversations. But I think it's absolutely true. It's very much sort of a pay it forward culture. And I think that really comes through in the career search space. So we have a lot of good questions coming in from the audience. I'm going to tee one up for John and Cannon, and feel free to either of you may take it, or if you both choose to answer. I'm going to tee one up to give you to think about, because I think it's something that you may want to just spend a few moments identifying the right choice here. And then I'm going to ask Abigail a question meanwhile. But the question is, can you provide an example of a peer you met at SOM or alum that had or has the job you want? And this is sort of along the lines of how useful have you found these peer connections to be? So sort of an aspirational figure, either amongst your peers or in the alumni network. So if you want to think on that for a moment, I'm going to give the question to Abigail, coming from Audrey. And the question is, what support is available for non-traditional paths? And specifically in this question, it was especially those in social enterprise, but I would broaden that in general. I always have a reaction to the term non-traditional, but I'll let Abigail weigh in on this.
As do I. No, actually, and I'm glad you asked that, because I was thinking about it as John and Cannon were sharing their experiences, which are, so valuable and so rich and very focused on 2 very structured industries and well-defined industries. And I think it's important for everybody listening to know that, if you want to do banking or consulting, there are amazing resources to support you. And if you want to do something that no one else has ever heard of, there are also amazing resources to support you. And I think that's actually what makes Yale SOM really thrive, is that we do have a lot of students who are following much more structured career paths that have processes that you can say, I need to do this, I have to follow this clear curriculum, and then it will pay off at the end. There are many students who are really trying to figure out what's the impact that they want to be making and what kind of role. And often those are roles that are hired, maybe once every few years, because the organizations that have them don't have needs all the time. as an office, we actually consider all of those organizations as valuable for our relationships as the organizations that hire 10 students or 10 MBAs or 20 MBAs or 50 MBAs from whatever school every year. One of the things that we really pay a lot of attention to is making sure that we continue to have that breadth and depth of relationships available to you, as well as on the coaching side. You know, a lot of it is working with you to figure out what are your goals and define them, and figure out how to identify the target organizations. We use alumni a lot for a lot of that expertise because a lot of times it's very specialized. And we also really build the relationships as much as we can, and you will build a lot of them on your own also with our guidance and support in doing that. And so I think a lot of it is looking at all the resources across ELSOM and knowing that many of our students do very individualized searches. And there are some students who meet with our office, you know, once a week, sometimes even more, because they have a very tailored, specific strategy, and they don't have a community of people who are doing the exact same search as they are. So they really use our office in that way to have that sounding board and to work much more closely. Others, you know, have a lot of peers who are going through a similar process and rely on their peers a little bit more, and they're somewhere in the middle. I think one of the things that actually really helps students, though, is that when they look around, they'll always find other people in a similar situation. So even if your goal is something that's not the same as your classmates, you will find other people who also are doing very individualized searches and finding different resources and doing, you know, we have one of the strategy sessions we have, which is one of my favorites. I don't get to facilitate strategy sessions very often, but every once in a while I do. And this is one of my favorites, is actually we use the librarian for the school, and she comes in and it's about building target lists. And she goes through some different resources, most of which people aren't as familiar with, about how to use them from a career perspective, not just from an academic perspective, and how can you find different organizations and filter them in different ways, in really fast, easy ways. And then really everybody has their laptops open and starts doing that and finding different organizations and getting excited about, oh my God, I never heard about this, or look, I didn't even know I could find out this information. And it's so great to see that energy build and that community, even when people have very different targets they're working on, just to see they're not the only ones doing those kinds of searches, really looking for that needle in the haystack. That's really what they want to do.
Great. Thank you, Abigail. So Kenan and John, I don't know if either of you want to weigh in on the previous question I asked about a peer or an alum within the SOM community with a job that interests you, that you were able to connect with.
Sure, yeah, I can start and you can then share a different one, Kenan. So yeah, so for me, I guess it would be, there's another ELSOM alum who graduated a year before I did, and I think he's working on something that is pretty cool and appealing that I might want to do later on. So essentially, he's working in the space that's called like search funds. So he, long story short, he raised a fund with the idea of using those proceeds, and I think he's in that process right now, of acquiring I think either second or third division German soccer team. And the idea is to operate that team, improve it, and then also maybe in 3-4 years, raise even more funds to then acquire like another team and sort of build a platform of teams. And I think that seems like a very attractive industry because of a number of reasons. Number one, I would eventually like to be an entrepreneur. So that's sort of a direction, step in that direction. It's also within like sports, which I like. And then it also has sort of like a finance component of like raising funds and like identifying like opportunities, doing like diligence, figuring out like valuation. So it sort of like feels like a really good, set of like things that I might be interested in doing in the long term. And I've kept in touch with him, and he seems to be pretty happy, doing well, excited about how he's doing. So I would say maybe that's my story, I guess, for that question.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can speak to a similar, actually peer from Yale currently, who worked in consulting prior to school, and during like a secondment from the firm, so like a break from consulting, worked at a Center for Rural Innovation, so building innovation centers in smaller cities and towns throughout America. So everything's not located in, 1 or 2 really, really big cities, which, I personally, coming from a rural background, I think is very, very cool as a way to, integrate the skills you're using as a way to, bring jobs and advanced industry to cities that wouldn't usually see it. And especially as a lot of us are thinking about these things differently due to COVID, I think, it was really, really cool to speak to somebody who had already been doing that work for several years, and came to SOM to even continue doing that. So that's somebody who I was really excited to meet and speak to about their career progression.
That's great, thank you. Kenan, this is a question for you coming in from Ty. Says, I'd also like to transition from education to consulting. And specifically, I want to focus on the part of the question says, did they value your teaching background? Was it a differentiator for you? And I think this probably echoes a sentiment a lot of people are having about is what, am I going to be able to make my past experience relevant in a new context? So if you want to share about how you were able to present and your teaching experience and how that was responded to.
Of course. And that's actually one of the things that I've loved most about SOM, is that because there are so many career changers, I never really felt alone in having to explain why I wanted to make that pivot or how my skills were relevant. I had, leaders of the second year consulting club, for instance, who had made switches from education or non-traditional backgrounds, if you will, who I was able to brainstorm with and help talk through how I could talk about classroom management and compare it to relationship building with clients, and really talk about how skills were transferable. But I think the other point with that, beyond just translating your skills, is something that I've really found to be a strength when talking to SOM alumni, is that so many people either were people who made similar transitions or had close friends who did that while at school, that I never felt like I had to explain myself. People were like, oh, you want to move from education to consulting? Of course, that makes sense. I've seen a lot of people do this, which I found to be really, really helpful. I think to the differentiation point, it might have helped in terms of being from a different background, but I do think it helped as I was recruiting, because I do want to eventually do education work again. So specifically when I was recruiting for McKinsey, I was able to talk to people who were doing education work at the firm, which I think to a differentiation point was helpful in creating connections over things that we both cared a lot about, which for me is the good side of networking. And yeah.
Great, thank you. I'm going to field sort of two related questions because I think it's about how you present some of your thinking on the career front within your application. And so one of them is it needed to have a goal prior to entering the program? And is it possible to explore personal or professional changes once you're there? So hopefully you've gotten a sense of the second part of that question. Absolutely, it is possible to explore changes once you're in school, but I think the question is probably more around how do you communicate that within sort of an application? And then a related question is, if I am considering a career change, should I communicate that in my application? And what's the best way to sort of successfully communicate your aspirations? So my answer to both is, and as it is with every part of the application, be true to yourself and your thought process. So don't present something that you think is the right answer or you think fits a certain mold. We understand that people are coming into the business school exploration process and application process from a wide sort of range of certainty when it comes to their career aspirations. And even those who feel very certain going into the process may still come into the MBA experience and change their mind. So after having done this and studied this for many, many years, it'd be very hypocritical if our office demanded a 5 and 10 year plan of you and then held you to it once you got to school. So that's very much not the approach. And we're very intentional in how we even ask about your career thinking in the application, that we ask you to identify your career interests and how have pursued them to date and plan to pursue them. That's very different than saying we need a regimented, timeline and set of goals. Presumably you're all coming into this process because you have interests and you have passions and you have things that you're interested in exploring more. But how defined those are is really up to you. So we, as an admissions team, when we review your application, we're not playing career advisor. We're not pretending to sit in Abigail's office and say, this is a reasonable, logical plan for you, or I think you should do something else. This isn't a good, a good match. Instead, we're really looking to see how much thought you've put into this. And so, I firmly believe if you've been able to develop a strong rationale and a reason why it makes sense to pursue your MBA, to pursue your passions, however those might end up crystallizing over the time you're at school. Even if you pivot, you'll be able to go through that exercise again. And so really kind of ask yourself, what are your interests? How is this MBA journey going to help you explore those interests, develop your capacity in the professional realm, and don't get too hung up on whether you found the kind of ideal next step for you. And hopefully to the point of, whether you should be hesitant to communicate that you're looking to change careers. I hope it's become abundantly clear through all of our conversation today. That is the norm. Of course, you're looking to make some sort of transition from where you are today. So you can absolutely feel comfortable in expressing that. I will say I think the only thing that can sort of trip you up in this, from the perspective of as we're looking at your applications is, we're expecting you to have done some research and have some understanding of what you're putting forth. And so, hopefully for your own sake, you're having conversations with people who are in the fields and sorts of roles that you're interested in, within your peer set or your network, and getting an understanding of that. And so if, if evidence comes through as you're talking about your aspirations, that you really haven't done that, if what you're talking about is not sort of grounded in reality, and you're not able to demonstrate that you've sort of taken the most basic steps to understand what it takes to get to the sorts of roles that you might be talking about, that can raise a little bit of a flag. But we're not talking about in-depth knowledge. You haven't gone through a CDO process yet. You haven't had the benefit of being part of professional clubs. And so the expectations are not sky high there, but we want to know that you're going into this process thoughtfully and with some sense of purpose. So that's some thoughts from an application perspective. I probably have time for another handful of questions. I want to give this one to Abigail from Noreen. So question is, for international students, what are the different resources that the CDO could offer? And are there specific resources oriented towards international students who might have an additional layer to their search?
There are some specific resources that we have for international students. There's some different databases that we have. We also organize a number of different events with regional alumni groups, because some of that is so, finding those connections and really cultivating them is so important, especially for international searches. We do cultivate relationships with international employers and international offices of US employers. No matter what, it depends. If someone's looking for a job outside the US, there's one search. And if they're looking for a job in the US, there's a very different search. Most of the time, we recommend that international students pursue both and do them in parallel. I think it's important for people to really keep their options open, and also know that visa restrictions change over time and things, and you want to have those options to be yours. The other thing that's so important is really tapping into, two things. One is, if you're doing a search outside the US, tapping into the alumni and broader network to make sure that you're really that you're tailoring your search for the environment that you're doing the search in. And there can be so many different nuances, and we can support you in doing that. And we have some resources that do that as well. For searches in the US, we have a number of different resources, some that can indicate who's hired international students before, who's sponsored. It's never completely going to be indicative of who's hiring going forward, because companies make different choices. One thing we do require of companies is that they say upfront if they are planning to sponsor or not. We would rather companies be very clear, don't waste your time with us, so you can focus your energy on the companies that are willing to sponsor international students. And while that can cause frustration sometimes to students, I really do think it lets you spend your time on the organizations that are open to you and that are going to really be places that want to embrace you. And so I think it's really important to work with our office to make sure that you have that clarity and that you're tapping into the resources and that you're tapping into when the postings are through us, that you know that information is, we push back a lot to make sure it's as accurate as possible at the time that it's advertised.
Great. And Abigail, this is another sort of population specific question, but for those who are considering joint degrees, so a joint degree between the School of Management and one of the other graduate or professional schools at Yale, are there any kind of differences or unique aspects of that career search to note?
There are, in some cases, more than others, and not even just by the school, sometimes by the individual and your goals. Some, depending on your joint degree, sometimes people have a focus of a business career, and sometimes, for instance, if it's a joint degree with the law school or with the medical school, people have a focus on a career in one place or the other using the degree. And sometimes students think of one as sort of the primary for their career. You have access to career offices at both schools that you're participating in, and we also work across schools. We partner a lot across the university with the other career offices, so a lot of it depends on what your goals are. But the advantage in some ways is that joint degrees sometimes have the opportunity to have more than one internship because you have a longer degree that you're doing, and that can, especially for people exploring, give you different options to do those kinds of explorations. Whether that means geography or function or industry, or just building your experiences and sort of progressing further along a path that you're interested in. It really varies. I think that I know that's sort of my answer to a lot of these things, but I think that's what's most important, and what's really most important about the Yale SM community overall and the way our office works with you. We have a lot of resources and we have a lot of expertise, and answering generalized questions is in many ways glossing over, because to answer your questions specifically really well, it's really to dive deep into what do you want, what are your values, what's important to you, what's the impact you're looking to make, and what kind of organization, and what are your criteria, and how do you prioritize them. And so that applies to joint degrees, it really applies to everybody. Building off of one of the things that you were talking about earlier, Laurel, it was asked in terms of the application, which is not how I'm answering it, but what it brought up for me as I was listening is students often start, and I'll say, decades ago, I was one of these students. I went to business school thinking I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew why I applied, I knew why I went, and I took a month off between working and starting my degree. And during that month, I realized I didn't want to do anything related to what I thought I wanted to do. And I didn't realize that until I walked into school the first day, and I was like, oh no, now why am I here? What am I doing? And felt completely lost. And had to really step back and ask myself, well, what was it about that I really loved? And really what it turned out was I was really excited about what the original goal that I articulated was, for a lot of reasons that are still valid to this day, over 20 years later. However, defining it as that industry and that career suddenly didn't work for me. And so it's looking at really what is it about whatever it is, if it's working in technology or working in some sort of social impact role, or working for a nonprofit, or working for a consulting firm, or working in an investment bank or asset management, or at a startup. Why? What is it that you want? What is it that's really exciting to you? What is it that you want to be learning about? Because you're going to thrive somewhere that you're curious and that you want to keep learning and growing. And sometimes what you think it's called for changes because of just a few details that you realize. For me, I had worked in finance before, and I really thought that I wanted to do equity research. And then I realized I wanted nothing tied to the market. It had ruled my life for the years before business school, and I didn't even realize it until I walked away from it. When I went up, I had a crazy day. When I went down, I had a crazy day. Like, it was just, and I realized I didn't want to have something external having that much power over me, which, some people love and thrive in. And I didn't notice how much it was impacting me until I stepped away for a month. There were so many things about it, though, that I still loved. And I needed to not just throw everything away, but really look and ask myself, what did I really want to be doing and learning? And what other fields could I do that in? And so I think it's really important to keep that curiosity and also keep asking yourself, even if you think you know exactly what you want, keep asking yourself. No one should come to school and walk out exactly the same place. You know, your classes are designed to expand what you're exposed to and what you know and what you want to know. Everything is, clubs are, all the other speakers, you know, all of the CDO programming, absolutely, but everything else you're doing also is really designed to expand your understanding and relationship with the rest of the world. And I think the more that you embrace that, really I would say the more fulfilling path you'll find.
Thank you, Abigail, for sharing that personal experience. And I think having been through the process yourself and so many on your team having their own personal journeys and working with so many students over time, I think your entire group brings so much empathy to this process and working with individual students, which I know benefits them so greatly. I am going to wrap things up with a final question for John and Cannon. You know, thinking about where those who are joining today's panel are in their process and trying to put yourself back into that point in time, what advice do you have for candidates who are applying to Yale SOM? You know, what do you wish you knew when you were going through this process?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think that the best thing that you could honestly do in order to sort of differentiate yourself and hopefully get the outcome that you want is to try and do as much research as you can, to try and get as connected as you can. We have a number of resources, a number of like student ambassadors. So to the extent you can sort of get connected with the community, talk to like as many people as you can, you know, in fields that you think you might be interested, or just in general with other like affinity clubs, I think that would be like a pretty good use of your time, because then away with all this knowledge, you can really make a tailored application and tailor your essays in a way that truly shows that you're being thoughtful and that you're really thinking about this process, that you're really interested in Yale SOM. So I'd say to the extent you can get connected and do as much research as you can, I think that's really the best you can do probably at this point.
Thank you, John.
I would echo talking to as many people, well, like creating connections with people, which might not be a talk to a ton of people. It might just be having some really good conversations with a few people. But that for me was very, very helpful in bringing to life what the schools were about. Specifically with SOM, like I really saw how impact was going on in every conversation I had, whether people were like consultants or bankers or whatever, which, you know, is a huge differentiator for SOM, and cool to see in conversations and not just on a web page. I think the other piece of advice that I wish I had done more of when I was preparing my applications were to get friends and family to just read over everything constantly, and not just at a finished product. I think that was really helpful for me as a career changer to get friends who were more familiar with talking about career changes and things like that, to read over it, to both make sure it made sense for what I was going for, but also read as authentic to me and my goals. And so walking that line is important, and I think can be really helpful to get feedback with.
All sound advice. John, Ken, and Abigail, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all of these extremely useful insights. I know that everyone joining us is very grateful for your time as well. I'll call quick attention. We're wrapping up our virtual open house week is winding down today and tomorrow, but I'll call your attention to a couple of upcoming events. We have an alumni panel taking place next week on July 21st, and then an application tips panel on August 6th. The admissions team hosts smaller group Q&As throughout the summer, so please feel free to check out our event page. We'd love to see you in some of those events in the coming weeks and months. So thank you once again to all of our panelists and for everyone joining today, and take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.